My YouTube family, it's time. In today's video, I'll be talking about the one and only Trent Jr., the god of the Raptors. If you are new, hit that like button, subscribe. I'll be giving my stories and my thoughts on Trent's journey to the NBA. So if you are new, please hit that like button, comment, subscribe. And I'm very turned up right now, so it's gonna be a long 10-minute video. So make sure you have your seatbelts ready and your popcorn ready, cause it's a story of Trent Jr. and let's get into this. Trent Jr., who was born in Columbus, Ohio in 1999, he's the son and former player of NBA first-round pick Trent Sr., who played in multiple seasons with his time in Toronto and Portland as for his career. Trent has always been considered an elite prospect on while attending Apple Valley High School in Minnesota, before transferring to a prep school in Prolific Prep Academy High School in Napa, California, where he averaged 31.8 points per game as a senior. He was rated as a consensus 5-star recruit into entering his lone season at Duke and was selected by the Kings in the second round of the 2018 draft. In college, Trent Jr. averaged 14.5 points, 4.2 rebounds, 1.4 assists, and 1.2 steals for the Blue Devils as he started all 37 games. Trent Jr. shot 41% from the field, 42% from 3, and he ranked 3rd on the team in scoring and set Duke's freshman record with 97 3-pointers made. Trent Jr. scored in double figures in 23 of his 27 games as he was named to the NCAA's All-Midwest Region team. In the 4 NCAA tournament games, Trent Jr. averaged 16.3 points, 4.8 rebounds, and made 3 threes per contest. In his final outing, as for the championship game, Trent went 5 of 8 in Duke's loss versus Kansas in the Elite 8 tournament. As for Trent Jr., standing at 6'5" and 6'6", he has developed to be one of the best 3-and-D players in the NBA, as he played for a team like the Raptors, who he plays for now, and in Portland Trail Blazers, to where he was assigned to the G League for a bit, where he developed himself for a bit with the Texas Legends, where the Portland Trail Blazers assigned to a G League affiliate after 15 games or so, and then he came back and progressed his own way to the NBA. I'm going to talk about Trent Jr.'s time and journey into the NBA. As for Trent Jr., he knew his journey in the NBA is a long journey, as he went through high school, he went through a prep school, he went through attending his first high school. As Trent Jr., for his start in the NBA, he had to go through many preparation again to the NBA and to now, and let's talk about that. As we all heard in high school for where Trent Jr. attended, he attended Apple Valley High School in Minnesota, where he was originally from. Then he transferred and moved to a Prolific Prep Academy in Napa, California. The reason why he transferred schools was to seek tougher competition before his way into college, as for his time in Duke. So this meant that he really wanted to play basketball and to be a one-and-done player in the NBA as for going to college. In high school as a sophomore, Trent Jr. averaged 21.5 points per game as a junior, as he averaged 26.4 points per game and 5.8 rebounds per game, while earning Gatorade's Minnesota Player of the Year. As for him earning the Gatorade Minnesota Player of the Year, he was first team in Minneapolis All-Metro honors. In addition to this award, also and him being named to a first-team All-Junior American by Max Prep. In addition, Trent Jr. averaged 22.2 points per game in the Nike circuit as for his AAU team. This was at the Nike EYBL circuit as for his AAU team, as I already said. His AAU team was called the Howard Pulley Panthers before transferring schools. As for his senior year, when he transferred to a senior, he averaged a record-breaking 31.8 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 3.8 assists per game while leading his team to a 29-3 record, which is a great win percentage. Following his senior year, he was selected to play in both the 2017 Jordan Brand Classic game and the 2017 All-McDonald's All-American Boys High School basketball game. In this way, Trent was a bucket on both ends of the court, as Trent was raised a 5-star recruit and considered one of the best players in the 2017 high school draft class, as Trent was ranked as an 8th overall recruit and a number 1 shooting guard in his high school class at the time. Trent Jr. in college, he was the same person as he was in high school. On November 10, 2016, Trent committed to Duke University and made some memorable performances as a Blue Devil. He played with many known names into the NBA, going to college with players like Grayson Allen, Wendell Carter Jr., and Marvin Bagley II. So that college team was lower as I see in here. As for the talent they had at roster, on December 9, 2017, Trent Jr. scored 25 points in an 89-84 loss versus Boston College, where he tied the Duke's freshman record for hitting 6 3-point shots in the game. On January 13th in 2018, despite him battling an illness, Trent scored 19 points to beat Wake Forest in the NCAA. This then leads to January 29, 2018, where he scored a double-double of 22 points, 10 rebounds in an 88-66 victory against Notre Dame. This then leads to Duke entering the ACC tournament as a second seed and then defeated Notre Dame in the first round. On March 18th, Trent scored 20.6 rebounds in a 74-69 loss in the semifinals against North California, who is Duke's rival as for ascents. As for Trent, him playing in his college days, he resigned to his 3-year commitment in college and then took it on himself to enter the NBA draft and to be a first-round pick as he believed in himself being so and him being next in the NBA. As for Gary Trent Jr., he's a bug-getter in college, and this correlates to the NBA now, but in a later sense. But honestly, let's talk about Gary Trent's time to the NBA draft. As he was supposed to be a first-round pick, but he fell to the second round, and let's hear about this. Leading up to draft night, Trent had an expectation to be a first overall pick, but he fell into the second round, as he got drafted to the Sacramento Kings with the 37th pick, and then he was traded to Portland for draft consideration. Then for Trent at a time, he then signed his 3-year rookie deal, as for months later in July. For his Summer League debut, he got 16 points in his first game as he debuted as a Trailblazer for November 4th against the Minnesota Timberwolves. As for Gary Trent Jr., why he didn't get a lot of playing time because he was playing with the likes of Damian Lillard and CJ in a star-studded backcourt in Portland. Then later on in January, he'd be sent to the Portland Trailblazers G League affiliate in the Texas Legends. With the next season coming along, Gary Trent Jr., the 37th pick in the 2018 draft, he only played 15 games for his debut season with the Blazers last season. But he had high hopes he could increase his role going into this season. As for his second season in the NBA, he hopes to continue and build his game and become an impact role player for Portland. As for the week in Las Vegas in the Summer League, he had a chance to show himself and showcase his early off-season work. After the Summer League, when he went off, he averaged a good 20.6 points, 6.4 rebounds, 1.8 assists in his 5 Summer League games with the team. Also has come along to wish Gary Trent Jr.'s 31-point outburst versus the Rockets, where Trent Jr. went 7-8 from beyond the arc. The rest of the Portland Trail Blazers and Gary Trent Jr. himself know he's about to take off for a team and be a good role player for the Blazers. As for Gary Trent Jr., Jim Moran said he knows he's a scorer, I know he can shoot, he's just a talented player, but I think as a coach, you just gotta keep working on their weaknesses, and at it right now, I think it's getting to him to buy more on the defensive end, but he was happy for him as for some of the good games he had in Summer League. As for that season, Gary Trent Jr., for 2019-2020 season, Gary Trent Jr. would average 8.9 points and shoot 41% from 3 in his second year, and that's very good, as Trent appeared in 61 games and 5 playoff games. As for his blowout performance on January the 18th, Trent scored a career-high 30 points against the Oklahoma City Thunder in a 116-119 loss with 5 rebounds, 3 steals, an assist, and a block, and in the playoffs, the Blazers faced the Lakers in the bubble. As for the bubble, honestly, Gary Trent Jr., he'd be faithful to the task and guarding the best player on the court in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Though Trent didn't play a lot this season due to the NBA shutdown in 2020, Trent knew what it took to come into the next season, as he's a great 3-and-D role player coming off the bench with the Blazers for something more for himself, as this is where Trent knew he would take off and be a star. As for next season, the Blazers tried using Trent in many ways possible. As at the halfway mark of the season, they just wanted a bigger scoring punch to pair with CJ and Damian Lillard off the bench. But honestly, it didn't really feel like the Blazers wanted Gary Trent Jr. around, as he's on an expiring deal, so I don't think they wanted to pay him. So, this then leads to Blazers, unlike most people, with Gary Trent Jr. having trouble playing alongside Dame and CJ. This meant they had to make a trade. They traded Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood to the Raptors for Norman Powell, who they got in return. As for the Blazers in obtaining Norman Powell, they signed him back on an extension for a 4 to 5 year deal, and then they traded him to the Clippers to make no sense as they got nothing in return. But like I said, for the Raptors, honestly, to get something, you have to get something. And the Raptors did a great job in obtaining and getting Gary Trent Jr. As for trading them for Norman Powell, who the Blazers wanted back, and they said no. So that's a good thing the Raptors did in my opinion, because without Gary Trent Jr., the Raptors would not be where they are now. As for the success and their storyline as for the Gary Trent story. But honestly, for the Raptors, I think they're very much happy with Gary Trent Jr. because they got the star they wanted. As for Gary Trent Jr., he's already taking a leap on the defensive end as for this season and last season in the NBA. But as for Gary Trent Jr., I think he found a home in Toronto and he's very much happier here because he fits the Raptors style of play and the schemes they do in game. And honestly, he feels much happier here as in Portland. He was depressed. As in Portland, he felt kind of depressed playing alongside Dame and CJ because he couldn't really develop as a player and as an individual collectively. As for Portland, I think for Gary Trent stands, I didn't really feel like he got a chance to really develop as he is on the Raptors because Gary Trent Jr., he was playing behind the best point guard in the league in Damian Lillard and playing alongside CJ McCollum as the offense is very ISO heavy. As for the Raptors, I think Gary Trent Jr. played very much better. In every game, he would average close to 15 points, and he would be that one player the Raptors need in their roster. As Trent honestly could just get a good 20 points in a game, and honestly, he would have crazy performances after when he was a starter, after when he joined Toronto. Like for example, you can probably say his 31 points versus a loss in Oklahoma City, and then you can probably say his 44 points on 17-19 shooting against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But as these performances, this meant that Gary Trent Jr. fit into the Raptors roster perfectly. And then afterwards, Gary Trent Jr. then had a contract on his expiring end, and the Raptors retained him in signing a 3-year, $54 million deal, along with Powell signing the same deal at the time with the Blazers. But as for Gary Trent Jr., I think he found a home in Toronto. As for his time with the Raptors to start the season, he averaged 16.2 points on 39.7 3-point percentage and a true shooting percentage of 15.1. As for the next season, Gary Trent Jr. continued that perfection and taking a jump on the defensive end for the Raptors, and that meant he was the main defender for most of the Raptors' schemes and for what they needed on the court, as Gary Trent Jr. was almost the Defensive Player of the Year candidate this season, as Gary Trent Jr. would do everything the Raptors needed defensively as for the beginning of the season, and this meant for him being a main defender that the Raptors needed in the court. I think Gary Trent Jr. was needed on and off the court, as Gary Trent Jr. was almost a Defensive Player of the Year candidate for the Raptors this season. But as for the Raptors' solid season of work, this continued in Gary Trent Jr. getting 18.3 points, shooting 38 from 3, and getting almost 2 steals a game. As for all his hard work, that's paid off. As for all Gary Trent Jr.'s hard work has now paid off, and now he's a certified starter in this league with the Raptors. As for the playoffs, the flu bug really hit him, but I think his numbers dipped a bit. But I think that Gary Trent Jr. is pretty much efficient toward the end of the series. But as for now, as Gary Trent Jr. is in a contract year, he told me to get paid big this season and to make a massive improvement as a player, as he always does. As for Gary Trent Jr., he had a long way to the NBA, and this is the story of the underdog, Gary Trent Jr. himself. So if you are new and you enjoyed that video on Gary Trent Jr., please be sure to hit that like button, comment, subscribe. At the end got a bit rusty, but I hope you all enjoyed this video on Gary Trent, who he is as a player and how he got to the NBA. So if you are new, hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and it's your boy kdeemo. I'm signing out. Peace.